So, you want to own a pharmaceutical plant in America, an idea that smells like absolute wealth. This trillion-dollar industry is the ultimate money-printing machine, churning out dollar billionaires faster than almost anywhere else on the planet. Yet, here is a classic American paradox. This industry makes billions, boasts sky-high profit margins, but the smartest minds on Wall Street, the very people holding the formulas for life-saving drugs, often end up bankrupt, drowning under a mountain of junk bonds. Welcome to the most bizarre economic equation of American capitalism, the curse of the $2 billion pill. Imagine you are holding a next-generation cancer-treating pill. It weighs less than a gram. Physically, the chemical ingredients inside are just cheap compressed powder. The cost for the factory line to produce the second, third, or millionth pill is generally a mere 2 cents. Looking at this number, you have a product with a unit margin pushing 90,000%, an absurd ratio that would make any South American drug lord green with envy. But the reality is far more brutal. To create that very first pill, you had to torch an average of 2.6 billion USD in cold, hard cash and endure a grueling wait of 10 to 15 years. Incredible, isn't it? The true nature of owning a pharmaceutical company isn't about running a factory or mixing chemicals. It is about shouldering a colossal financial risk known as sunk cost. You are not charging 2 cents for the chemical compounds. You are forcing the consumer to bear the $2.6 billion weight of thousands of bloody failures in the laboratory. Hundreds of millions of dollars are paid in salaries to scientific elites, alongside mountains of cash to sustain an R&D, research and development machine that continuously burns money just to blindly stumble upon the one formula that actually works. But it doesn't stop there. Most biotech startups do not have $2 billion sitting in the bank. They have to mortgage their corporate lives, borrowing from private equity firms at exorbitant interest rates. With each passing day, the burn rate erodes the company's accounts, while the debt balloons exponentially. The consequence? When the pill finally comes to life, you are forced to sell a bottle that costs a few pennies to make for $1,000 to the patient. Not because you are a greedy monster, but simply because, if you don't demand that price, your company will instantly run out of cash, default on its debt, and be torn apart by Wall Street creditors. The first pill is a suspended death sentence, forcing you to extract every possible dollar from the market just to survive. You throw $2 billion into R&D, but where exactly does that massive fortune evaporate? Let me be perfectly blunt. It is incinerated inside a slaughterhouse known as the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA. The FDA approval journey is not a standard scientific process. In the eyes of Wall Street financiers, it is quite literally the most brutal game of Russian roulette in the business world, where you point a loaded gun at your company's head and pull the trigger 3 times. Those are the 3 phases of clinical trials. The first pull of the trigger, Phase 1. You test the drug on a few dozen healthy volunteers just to see if it kills them. If you pass, you breathe a sigh of relief. But your company's bank account is already bleeding somewhere between $20 million to $30 million. The second pull, Phase 2. Now you start testing on a few hundred actual patients. This phase is infamously known as the graveyard of biotech, because the failure rate here hits a staggering 70%. Chemical compounds suddenly lose their efficacy or trigger uncontrollable side effects. However, if you are lucky enough to survive Phase 2, heavy-hitting players from private equity firms start smelling blood. They inject you with massive capital to gear up for the final showdown. And then, you enter Phase 3, the grandest all-in gamble of capitalism. You must conduct double-blind trials on thousands of patients across multiple countries. Every time you open your eyes in the morning, money pours out of your pockets like a waterfall. A standard Phase 3 trial can easily devour $300 million to $500 million in cold, hard cash. You hire clinical research organizations, CROs, at extortionate rates, and pay top-tier hospitals to gather data. Your entire cost of capital is stretched to its absolute breaking point. But the real drama begins when you submit your application and await the final verdict from the FDA. On the day the agency announces its decision, thousands of investors are glued to the stock ticker. If the FDA nods yes, your stock instantly shoots to the moon, generating billions in market capitalization in mere seconds. But what if the FDA waves its hand, says no, and sends back a complete response letter? Catastrophe strikes instantly. Within 5 minutes of the opening bell, your stock can vaporize 80% to 90% of its value. There are no second chances, no runner-up prizes. The hundreds of millions of dollars just burned in Phase 3 officially turn into absolute garbage. Investment funds immediately reverse course to cut their losses, severing all cash supply lines. Your business spirals into sudden default, the factory shuts down, and your most brilliant scientists sadly pack their belongings and hit the street. That is the brutal rule of the pharmaceutical game. You don't just need a genius mind. You need nerves of steel to bet your entire empire on a single piece of certification paper. Suppose you survive the FDA's Russian roulette, holding that golden ticket in your hand. At this point, you think you're going to start manufacturing life-saving drugs? Think again. The very first thing you do is pick up the phone and call an army of lawyers. The true nature of owning a pharmaceutical plant in America has absolutely nothing to do with chemicals or healthcare. In reality, you are in the business of selling a legal monopoly period. U.S. law dictates that a patent has an exact lifespan of 20 years. That might sound long, but you've already wasted 10 to 15 years stuck in the miserable swamp of R&D testing. Mathematically, the actual time you have left to milk the market, recoup your $2.6 billion in capital, and generate a profit for your shareholders is a mere 5 to 10 years. And the most terrifying event happens on the very last day of that timeline. When that patent expires, generic drug companies, generic drugs, swarm in like a pack of starving wolves. Your drug's price will vaporize by 80% to 90% overnight. Wall Street calls this catastrophe the patent cliff. Your money printing machine officially turns into scrap metal. To prevent that bloody scenario, pharmaceutical bosses birthed a classic financial trick, evergreening. To put it bluntly, this is the art of utilizing lawyers to build a patent thicket to artificially extend the legal monopoly to infinity. Look at the giant AbbVie and their arthritis mega blockbuster Humira. Instead of accepting free market competition when their monopoly was set to expire, they navigated the legal system to file for over 250 different patents for the exact same drug. The method is shockingly simple. They tweak an insignificant inactive ingredient, shift the dosing schedule from twice a day to once a day, or even just design a new button on the injection pen. Boom! They secure a brand new exclusive license, pushing cheap competitors away for decades. The result? Humira drained the American healthcare system, bringing AbbVie over $200 billion USD in lifetime revenue. At this point, the true essence of this industry is fully exposed. You are not paying endless salaries to scientists to discover new cures. You are paying tens of millions of dollars to Wall Street lawyers to fiercely guard an 80% to 90% monopoly profit margin on an ancient pill. Don't think that just because you have a great drug and an army of lawyers guarding your patent, money will automatically flow into your pockets. In America, patients do not buy drugs directly from your factory. Between you and millions of patients stands a fortified steel door, and the gatekeepers are a powerful syndicate of middlemen known as PBMs, short for Pharmacy Benefit Managers. Wall Street refers to them as the Godfathers of healthcare. Let's dissect the cash flow map to see where the money actually goes. Currently, the big three PBMs, CVS Caremark, Express Scripts, and Optum Rx, dominate a massive 80% of the US market. Where does their life and death power come from? Ultimately, they hold the ultimate weapon, the formulary, the list of drugs covered by insurance. If your product isn't on this golden list, doctors will never prescribe it, insurance companies will refuse to pay, and your $2 billion pill officially rots in a warehouse. But to get your drug on the shelf, you have to obediently pay protection money. The financial world masks this law of the jungle fee with a very elegant name, rebates. Here is how the cash flow manipulation game works. Suppose your factory needs to net $100 for a bottle of pills to break even and make enough profit to cover your debt. The PBM heavyweights will knock on your door and issue an ultimatum. If you want your drug on the insurance list, give us a 50% rebate, or get lost. You aren't stupid enough to cut into your own flesh, but you also can't fight the system. So, you start playing the price inflation game. You automatically pump the list price of that bottle up to $1,000. After setting that astronomical price, You happily hand over $500 in hidden rebate money to the PBM godfathers. You pocket the rest, which is more than enough to cover your manufacturing costs and bank loans. Meanwhile, the PBMs pat themselves on the back, bragging to insurance companies that they just negotiated a 50% discount for patients. Indeed, it is a flawless theatrical performance. Only one party gets stripped bare, and that is the American consumer. Patients without insurance, or with poor coverage, are forced to buy the drug at that artificially inflated $1,000 list price. This is exactly why a vial of insulin in the US costs up to $300, while just across the border in Canada, it costs a mere $30. The billion-dollar cash flow does not go to laboratories to research new drugs. It is drained completely by an intermediary distribution system sitting comfortably in air-conditioned Wall Street offices. Looking back at the colossal risks of burning money on R&D or the FDA's Russian roulette, you are probably wondering, are Wall Street tycoons crazy to keep diving into this? The truth is, the most cunning old wolves absolutely refuse to do R&D. They bypass all scientific risks, using a much sharper financial tool: M&A, mergers and acquisitions. To put it bluntly, instead of throwing $2 billion and 10 years of their youth into laboratories, hedge funds and financial elites choose to scour the market to buy existing drugs. Their absolute favorite targets are orphan drugs. These are medications that treat incredibly rare diseases, where the patient population across the entire US might only be a few thousand people. But this tiny market creates a lethal mathematical advantage. It is far too small for generic drug manufacturers to even bother jumping in to compete. When you spend capital to outright buy the rights to an orphan drug, you automatically secure an absolute monopoly position without breaking a single drop of sweat in research. Patients have no choices, and there are no alternative products on the pharmacy shelf. And the moment the ink dries on the M&A contract, you execute the most classic squeezing maneuver. You pull the pricing lever. The most shocking example of this playbook is the operation run by Martin Shkreli, famously vilified by American media as the Pharma bro. In 2015, his company acquired the rights to Daraprim, a life-saving medication for parasitic infections, often used by HIV/AIDS patients, that had existed peacefully for 60 years. On the exact same day he took control, Shkreli did something that left the entire nation stunned. He jacked up the price of a single pill from $13.50 straight to $750 overnight, a tyrannical increase of over 5,400%. Ultimately, the ROI math of this milking model is brutally perfect. You don't have to struggle to prove to the FDA that your drug works, because it has already been in circulation for decades. You simply use borrowed money from trusts, acquire a proven monopoly cash flow, and then utilize your pricing power to strangle the insurance system. Patients can scream, the media can curse, but they still have to pay. To the financial elites, a rare terminal illness with no alternative treatment is no different than a perpetual high-yield bond, where the return on investment doesn't just stop at 500% or 5,000%, but becomes an eternal, galloping money-printing machine. Look at one of the most classic collapses in Wall Street history to see just how massively this squeezing scheme can inflate. In the early 2010s, investors went absolutely wild for a monster named Valeant Pharmaceuticals. Under the hands of CEO Michael Pearson, Valeant completely discarded the traditional healthcare model. Seeing burning cash on R&D as pure stupidity, Pearson ruthlessly fired droves of scientists and transformed this pharma company into a brutal hedge fund. The playbook was always on repeat: issue billions of dollars in junk bonds, use that debt to acquire smaller pharma companies holding monopoly drugs, and then mercilessly hike prices by dozens of times. Take the heart medication Nitropress, for instance. Immediately after Valeant acquired it, its price skyrocketed by 212% in a single day. But how do you force the insurance system to pay for those astronomical prices when the market is full of cheap generic alternatives? The answer is creating a phantom network. Valeant secretly established a front company pharmacy chain named Philidor. When a doctor wrote a prescription, instead of letting the patient take it to a normal pharmacy, where the pharmacist would automatically switch it to a cheap generic, as dictated by insurance, the prescription was routed straight into Philidor's system. Through sophisticated tricks designed to deceive insurance billing codes, Philidor automatically delivered Valeant's overpriced boxes of pills right to patients' doorsteps, forcing insurance companies to foot the bill. A dark cash flow maneuvering trick, yet flawlessly effective. But you can't hide fire in paper forever. In 2015, investigative journalists and short sellers started smelling the rot. The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, officially cracked down on the Philidor Phantom network. When the scandal bomb detonated, Valeant's scienceless, junk debt-ridden business model collapsed like a house of cards. Completely cut off from its dirty cash flow, their stock free fell from a peak of $262 down to less than $10. Ultimately, over $90 billion USD in market capitalization vanished without a trace, leaving behind a ruin with up to $30 billion USD in junk debt and executives bitterly facing subpoenas. Owning a pharmaceutical empire is not just about compounding drugs or acquiring competitors. The real game at the billionaire level is the ability to bend the law. You are doing business in America, the absolute holy land of class action lawsuits. When you sell a pill to millions of people, the probability that someone experiences side effects or worse, loses their life, is not a matter of if, but when. But the financial elites are not terrified. They view these billion-dollar penalties simply as the cost of doing business. To protect their empires from legal troubles right from the cradle, pharmaceutical bosses operate an expensive machine that yields the highest return on investment, ROI, in the world: lobbying. Every single year, the pharmaceutical industry pours around $300 to $400 million USD into the U.S. Congress, a figure that far exceeds the combined lobbying budgets of the oil or weapons industries. What exactly are you spending that much cold hard cash for? To ensure that drug price control legislations are permanently shelved and that the U.S. government is never allowed to use its national leverage to force down prices at the negotiation table. Spending a few $100 million in grease money to protect hundreds of billions of dollars in profit margins is, ultimately, an outrageously good investment equation, an ROI you cannot find on any stock market. However, sometimes even a political protection umbrella cannot save you if the consequences you unleash are unimaginably catastrophic. The tragedy of Purdue Pharma and the Sackler family stands as the bloodiest testament to this ultimate risk. They created OxyContin, a highly addictive opioid painkiller. Instead of issuing warnings, they launched dirty marketing campaigns, bribing thousands of doctors to deceive the entire American healthcare system into believing this pill was completely safe and non-addictive. The consequence was hundreds of thousands of Americans sinking into addiction and losing their lives to overdoses, kicking off the worst medical crisis in modern history. When the wave of public outrage detonated, thousands of lawsuits from various states crashed down simultaneously. Purdue Pharma officially collapsed, being forced to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy and facing settlement agreements reaching up to $6 billion USD. The press cheered that justice had been served and evil had paid its dues. But let's look deeply into the real financial picture. During the 2 decades of frantically pumping OxyContin into the market, the Sackler family had managed to gut the company, siphoning over $10 billion USD in profits into their private pockets. They accepted paying the fines, accepted handing over the lifeless corpse of Purdue Pharma to the creditors, but the vast majority of their massive personal wealth, safely hidden in offshore trusts, remained completely untouchable. The bitter fruit and the debt were left for society to swallow, while billions of dollars in cash stayed securely in the pockets of the very people who pulled the strings from the shadows. Looking back at this entire insane spiral, from the R&D laboratories to the dark corridors of the PBM Godfathers, it is time we deliver the final verdict. Is owning a pharmaceutical company ultimately a gamble worth taking? Let's put the return on investment, ROI equation, on the scale between the two extremes. In the most optimistic scenario, you hit the U.S. Food and Drug Administration jackpot. Your vial of medicine clears Phase 3, proudly becoming a medical blockbuster drug, meaning a money-printing machine that surpasses $1 billion USD in annual revenue. With a formidable army of lawyers successfully building a patent thicket, you leisurely enjoy 10 to 15 years of absolute monopoly. At this point, the 90,000% profit margin on every 2-cent pill begins to unleash its destructive power. The initial $2.6 billion USD sunk cost will be recouped within just the first 2 to 3 years. For the remaining time, pure cash flow pours straight into the shareholders' pockets. You officially enter the Wall Street Billionaire Club, sipping champagne on a yacht and leaving all earthly troubles for your lobbying team to handle. But life isn't always a bed of roses. Let's look straight into the worst-case scenario, one with a much higher realistic probability of occurring. What happens if, in the final stoppage time of Phase 3, the FDA coldly throws a complete response letter in your face? At that exact second, your company's market capitalization vaporizes by 90%. There is zero revenue, but that $500 million USD chunk of junk debt you borrowed from private equity funds is still sitting right there, plus the compounding interest dancing higher every single day. The financial heavyweights immediately pull the plug on your life support, completely severing the cash supply. With no other way out, you are forced to sign the Chapter 11 bankruptcy filing, watching your factory being liquidated into scrap metal, while you walk away from the game empty-handed, with a resume drowning in debt. Ultimately, owning a pharmaceutical plant in America is absolutely not a traditional business model. It is a gigantic, legalized casino where players disguised as scientists gamble with the very lives of their businesses, while the financial elites hold the house edge. And you know the most ruthless rule of any casino: whether you win or lose at the FDA's Russian roulette, the predatory lenders, the PBM middlemen, and the Wall Street lawyers are always the ones sweeping up the last remaining dollars. Human health, indeed, is nothing more than gambling chips on the capitalist chessboard.